How to raise the clay. I have this centered piece of clay here. You need to find out where the middle of it is, and if you're not sure how to do that, or if you can't just tell by feel or by looking at it, then you can take a tool, like this wooden knife tool, touch it down and make a little circle here, and that'll tell you exactly where the middle is. I just hold the sponge in my hand because it's easy for me to throw it in my hand and it's always there if I need it. So cup your hands on the outside like this, and put your thumbs in the middle, exactly where the middle is. If you feel your thumbs being on the outside, they'll move around like this, and it won't work. So you need to have your thumbs right directly in the middle, and you don't even really have to be able to see the clay to do this. It's just a feel or touch kind of thing. Squeeze some water into there because you don't want to have a lot of friction. And you're pushing down with your thumbs. You're not pushing out with your thumbs, or you're not spreading your thumbs. It's like a spear or a diver going into the water, so it's straight down. And you're holding the clay like this because you always should be holding the outside of the clay to some degree in order to maintain your knowledge of whether it's still in center or not. It's easy for the clay to become uncentered when you're working it, and if you catch it in time, it's easy for you to center it back, to get it back in center. If you forget about it, it's easy to screw it up. So the hole became too deep for my thumb, so now I'm going to use my hand. Notice that I put my right hand on the outside like this to maintain center. I put my left hand in the middle of the clay, but I touch my hands together like this. Don't go like this where your hands are void of one another. They don't know what they're doing. You have to think too much. You want to try to avoid thinking in these phases and just go off of what your hands are telling you. So my hands are touching, and I just push straight down again. I'm trying to keep about this much clay, about 3/4 of an inch of clay in the base. If you're curious about how deep it is, you can take a needle tool, jam it in the bottom, put your finger down to the end of the needle tool, you'll come out, you'll have a little bit of the needle tool showing maybe this much, too much, maybe this much, not enough. Either way, needle tool is a good way to measure this, but I'm used to doing it, so I didn't grab one because I don't usually use it for that. A little too much water there. If you get a puddle down in there, you just stick the sponge down in there and soak it up, squeeze it back in the bucket. So now you have a hole in the middle, and you need to pull it out so that the floor is wider and the clay wall is thinner. But you want the clay wall to be as consistently thick from bottom to top as you can. So when you're pulling the bottom out, don't pull it like this, where you're going to be pulling it up and leave a lot of clay in the bottom. And don't push downward while you're doing it, or you'll just go right through the bottom of the clay, and you'll hit the bat, and you'll just tear through the bottom, and then you won't be able to make a bowl, which is what I was going to make. Pull it straight across, and you use your hand kind of like a big lobster claw. So your right hand's out here, your left hand goes inside, and your thumb again is out here, and you're just going to pull straight into your palm so the floor opens up, the walls become narrower, and if you see right here, there's a straight area, just vertical area that's left in here that's going to be filled with clay. I'll move this so you can see better. So I'm putting pressure on my right hand to keep it in center, and I'm obviously putting pressure on my left hand to pull the inside outward. There. Now it's about, I'd say, that thick, bottom to top, a little bit thinner at the top if you want to fix that, and you want it to remain the same thickness, bottom to top. Cup the clay with your left hand. This is all if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, everything's backwards. Cup the clay with your left hand, push down either with the sponge with really no water in it or with your finger. It's called setting the lip. I sometimes use the sponge because it cups the clay nicely. My hand doesn't cup the clay quite as well. So it's called setting the lip. You do this multiple times throughout the throwing process. It does a lot of things. Maintains consistency, thickness, and it also keeps the lip really strong. And the lip is a really key aspect of the whole throwing process, and if the lip starts to get weak, then the whole thing starts to fall apart pretty rapidly. This is slip right here. It comes off the clay just naturally. Instead of using more water, you can just put this slip right back on the clay, and it keeps it lubricated, and keeps the friction from becoming too great, and also it keeps you from using too much water, which is a common problem for people. So now we're going to raise it. There's a couple different ways to do it, and I use the sponge. I teach beginners to use it with the sponge because I think it's much easier. Your fingers are really inconsistent, like a little mountain range. Put the sponge on there, and they're really consistent, like just like one big finger. So push in on the bottom, in order to make this little divot down here. Give yourself a little head start. I'm just cleaning the sponge off. I don't really need water in it right now. So this is going to give you a head start for the outside. The inside is just straight down and over. So it's a little soft 90-degree angle in there. What your hands are going to look like is this will be the inside hand, this will be the outside hand, and the outside hand's lower because it's on the wheel head. The inside hand has the clay there above it, so it can't go down as far as the outside. So you're going to set your hands. You're going to, if it's small, something a small piece of clay like this, you're going to bring your hand over so that you can touch again, because it's really important when you can. You're going to have your hands like this, and once you get the wheel speed set, which is usually somewhere in this ballpark, you're going to start to raise your hands, and you want to do it at a speed that gets along nicely with the wheel speed. If you do it too fast, you'll just get this barbershop pole look, and if you do it too slow, you'll spend too long in one position, in one area, and you'll get that area to be too thin, and it'll break right there. So it's very important that your hands don't go like this or like this. A lot of people start to move their hands like this. They need to be in this position like it's a little excavator, or like you're picking something up with a bucket. Like I said, there's different ways to do it. This is just how I teach beginners because I think it's the easiest way. So you lean way down over the wheel. Your shoulders should be way down over the clay that you're working on. I think it's a lot easier to get your hands in the right position this way. And I know it looks like my hand's like this, but I have my fingers cupped on the inside. So that's where it's actually contacting the clay. When you raise it up, you don't pinch it, you don't pull it, you just grab the clay and then you move it, applying slight pressure. And as the clay comes up, it jumps between your fingers like that. It just bumps between your fingers like maybe an ocean wave. And there's a bump that you'll feel. It'll rise all the way up until it just makes the clay get taller, because you're squeezing it in, so that clay has to go somewhere, and it goes into the height. So I speed it up just a bit to match my raising. A lot of times you don't get a lot of height out of the first raise. I always think of it as kind of reorienting the clay into the next movement that it's going to do. So you're kind of orienting all those little clay strands. You can think of them like muscle fibers. Alright, kind of damp your hand there on the inside. Use your hand to disperse the water to the inside wall so it doesn't dry out partway through. Put your little bump in the bottom. My hands are touching right here. And I'm going to raise it right now. Again, didn't really get a ton of height out of that. I don't really worry too much about getting a lot of height out of each raise. I try to focus more on consistency of thickness and steadiness of my hands so that it doesn't get out of whack. Starting to get more height now. I'm going to bring it in to keep it vertical, keep the walls vertical. When you're raising, a lot of times it's easy for the pot to go like this, and if you just keep going, it just gets out of control. It starts growing and growing and growing, and it flops. So keep it either vertical or slightly tilted in. If it starts to dry out just a little bit, go ahead and re-dampen it. Remember, you can use this slip, collect it off your hands and redistribute it on the clay. So I'm going to put my little bump in the bottom again. Still touching my hands together right here, the thumbs. And I lessen the pressure just a little as I get closer to the lip. The wall right here is probably 1/8 of an inch or so thinner than the lip. Maybe not quite 1/8, but I try to keep the lip just a little bit thicker throughout the throwing process because, like I was saying before, the lip is a quintessential part. It's an important aspect of the strength of this whole round, cylinder. And so if the lip gets really thin and weak, it's prone to cracking, which just leads to a lot of trouble with the rest of the walls. So I can always raise the lip later if I want, if it's too thick. It's not a problem. And if I leave it a little thicker, it's a lot stronger. So I'm getting to the point where my consistency, I'm just checking it right now. My finger's like this, my finger on the inside is like this, so I have 2 flat surfaces, just checking for consistency. And I'm just a little thicker at the bottom, which is okay. And I'm a pretty good consistency all the way throughout. Right now I'm going to clean my hands off so you can see. Right now I'm probably about that thick, I'd say, all the way throughout. Sometimes if you get it down to about this thick, let's say, you know, 1/4 of an inch, it's nice, it feels good, but then when you start working with it, it becomes really floppy and it's harder and harder to work with. So if you leave things just a little bit thicker, approaching maybe like 1/2 inch, it's much easier to shape things. And my philosophy is you can always trim out a little bit. It's just much easier for beginners to start working with it like this rather than trying to make it really thin and perfect each time and then just getting discouraged when it flops and it breaks. So this is a cylinder, beginning